as you can see, quite a few items that you've asked for to be presented. So I was going to propose for most of them that we have the presentation of the key points from the lead person who's going to present, and then invite you to have questions rather than go through, hundreds of slides. Is that okay? I'm just concerned that I don't want to stop you discussing what you want to discuss, but I'm just concerned we'll have, hours of presentation and we won't have a chance to really discuss things in the time we have available. So if that's okay, we'll go with that. Apologies for absence, Julie.
We've got Graham Bridgman and Arlene Unstall.
Okay. Declarations of interest? No? Okay. So the minutes of the last formal meeting on the 2nd of December and the private session also on the 2nd of December at 4.1. Any corrections, please? Oh, John, sorry, you got your hand up. John Barrett, you got your hand?
It's an error, Martin. I'm trying to get my hand to go down. It's not,
oh, okay. I can do it. I can
go down at the moment.
I can do it for you.
Thank you very much.
He says.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Matters arising. I didn't see anything arising. There's no formal ones unless anyone's got anything which they feel we should pick up. Okay. So the item 5 then is the quality account, the first of the significant ones. This is Q3, the quality account. And Amanda Mollett, I hope, oh yeah, I can see Amanda. Yes, Amanda is here just to take us through the key points. And remember, this is not the final one, this is the Q3. So Amanda, shall I hand over to you, please?
Yeah, morning everyone. So as Martin says, this is the draft account for 2021. As in previous years, we're required to share that draft account with our stakeholders, including our Council of Governors. So the report consists of 3 main sections in line with Department of Health and NHS requirements. It is a really large document, so we invite governors to submit their feedback to Paul as lead governor before the 16th of April. And then any points of accuracy or clarification, we'll try and take those into consideration for the final document for you. The final document will go to board in May, and then we're required to publish it in June. So the key points I'd probably like to draw your attention to are on page 22 of the PDF you've got. It gives the positive highlights and the overall summary of our achievements. And that links on page 23 with our actual metrics for the year. Each of those metrics have also got a hyperlink on, so you can click on the hyperlink to then go to the narrative within the report. We're finalising the metrics currently for 21-22 in line with our true north. I can confirm for patient safety, falls, self-harm and avoidable deaths due to deteriorating patient will be included next year as priority metrics. And then finally, the other main section to draw your attention to is section 2.1.5, which is on page 52. So that's our service improvement section. It's 13 pages long, it's quite long, but it highlights the significant improvements the services have made, in particular how quickly they've adapted to COVID-19 and how they've continued to deliver services. They're probably the key points, so I'd probably then, it is a big document, so I'll hand over, I don't know who's already read it. If there's any questions Jason and I can answer today, then we'll do our best to do that for you.
Sorry, Amanda. Just in terms of the key things, there's the question that the parameter that the governors selected to be reported on. Is that correct? And did I see something about the fact that it's not going to be audited because of COVID? Is that right? Or
yeah, so NHSI have since released, after we agreed the indicator with you, which was due to be audited now, NHSI have now released guidance that actually no trust is going to be audited externally. So that's by our external auditors, Deloitte. That won't be occurring this year, and actually it probably won't be occurring in future years either, but we haven't got the final guidance on that. As soon as we do have, we'll share it with you, but it was based on risk and the burden of COVID-19, which is why they withdrew that element.
Okay. Any questions from governors or about, I think rather than lots of detail, those ones you can feed in through Paul. But any matters about the format or the general paper, it's a pretty prescribed paper, isn't it?
Yeah.
John.
Yeah, just to say how much this document's improved over my time as a governor. I think thanks largely to Amanda's hard work. Thank you very much, Amanda. And yeah, I haven't read it all, obviously, at this stage in time, but the what you were talking about on page 52, the summary of each service, I think gives a very, very good indication of how things have been coping, and it's one of the most interesting, informative parts of the document. So yeah, it's very good, especially with COVID and stuff going on. I think people have been doing some amazing stuff, and it's fantastic to see we're able to still produce such a comprehensive report of things when it must be quite difficult to see what people are doing.
Okay, thank you for that, John. Any other comments, questions? June, I think you had a question about where to feed back, but I think through Paul as a governor, and then that'll go in. Anything else? Looks as though, Amanda, you have fulfilled all your requirements. I'm sure there'll be some questions before we get to the final year end, but thank you very much. And as colleagues have said, I think it is a very clear report now. The format's good. And with all the hyperlinks, maybe we will never produce a paper version. I don't know, but might be a good thing. Okay, Amanda, thank you very much. We'll let you go.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
So if we could move on to the committee steering groups, and there's the 3 groups, living life to the full. John.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Martin. I mentioned in the pre-meeting that Jenny kindly sent out the 2 presentations from the Living Life to the Full group to all governors in NEDs, and I've had good feedback that people found this helpful and useful. So I think maybe if we do further presentations on various services, we might do the same thing, especially as we're in sort of lockdown. But a very good, very informative meeting, and it was good to be able to form a good link in with a third sector organisation, because Tom Lake's wife has been a trustee of Home Start for quite a few years, and how that was working in conjunction with trust services is a very good indication of lots of the co-working that goes on. And I think as I mentioned to Martin in an email, I was very, very impressed with the range of services that Sam Dineshpur was aware of and actually had links and communication with, and that seemed a particularly proactive service in going out and finding these links, which are absolutely key, especially now, even more so than they were before, in helping support particular cohorts of patients. Mm-hmm. And obviously pregnant patients have been sometimes particularly affected in this time, especially new time first mums, like my next door neighbour, who's had a interesting birth and things. But yes, it was a good presentation, well worthwhile, and hopefully people find it useful. We'll do more things like that in the future.
Thank you, John. And I think doing it online probably was quite a good thing, wasn't it? Getting more people to be involved.
It seems to work very well, and I think we're getting more non-core members of the group taking part. Okay. I know Deborah Edwards joined us this time, and several other people that aren't, core members of the group. So I think it's perhaps a bit easier in many ways to for people to take part in things, because they don't have to travel to Bracknell to get to a meeting, sort of thing. But we'll see. Depends where our lovely new headquarters is, Martin, when it comes up.
It's virtual. It's in the cloud, I think, John.
Is it? Well, no. I'm told it's at 4 different places. I hear a rumour, but all in Bracknell. So.
Good. Any questions for John?
No, don't say a word, John.
No. John, thanks so much. Then.
Okay. Thank you.
Membership, Tom.
Okay. Well, our membership itself is holding up,
And I think following on, I'll just say we have discussed the AGM quite a lot, and of course discussed it at the coffee morning with Martin. And I'll just say, following on from exactly what John said about online meetings, I think we do feel that that having the meeting online was definitely an asset for some people in being able to take part. So we've had, of course, it has a different feel. And personally, I feel if we could have both, it would be ideal. Have a meeting that was both webcast, and had an in-person meeting at the heart of it as well. But we'll have to see how that works.
Yes.
But we're we're at the stage now when we can make some decisions about the next AGM. And so I do urge governors to think about it. Now, the membership is doing well, but it's still not evenly distributed across the borough. But the thing I think we have to think about really carefully now, sort of promptly, are the elections. We have 3 vacancies coming up in Bracknell, so it's really serious. We've got, we need another new governor in Wokingham and so on. We want someone from the rest of England, and anything that members can do, especially to communicate this. There's a poster which perhaps Julie could circulate again, but asking people to pass that poster on to any organisations through any organisations they know. I think that'll be very useful, And of course, while we're doing this, we remember we'd like to increase the diversity of council, but basically the first thing is we want to have the places filled. So just urge people, even outside their own area, to communicate and see what they can do in enticing people to this wonderful role of Governor of Berkshire Healthcare. I think that's the main amount of what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. John Barrett, have you got your hand up again, or is that...
Yes, I have, Martin. Yeah, Tom said the word I was going to say, which was diversity, just after I put my hand up. But I don't know how we go about this issue. We seem to be desperate to find anyone who wants to be a governor at any rate, let alone aim for a widespread diversity of people within that group. It's a difficult issue, and I'm sure that it's something to have a chat with Jane about when she gives her talk next. But I certainly have found it very difficult, and after my experience of recommending a governor who didn't last very long with us, I'm a bit reluctant to do so again. But people don't know what we are still, and it's very difficult to interest people to be a part of something they don't know what it is. So many people just don't know foundation trusts exist. They think with the GP or the hospital still. It's a difficult sell, I think, but I've no idea how we solve it. But you're right, we need to get people from somewhere.
I'll come back in a minute, John, but Isabel had her hand up, I think, and...
I did. Well, I'm already working on it because I'm involved with a lot of community groups, nothing political. And I've certainly got somebody who's very interested in Bracknell, and I'm getting the message out to some other small groups, charities and voluntary organisations who actually will have a lot to contribute, I hope. Anyway.
Thank you, Isabel. Very welcome. Julia.
And I agree with John. I think diversity is really important at the minute. We do have several vacancies, and it's a good opportunity to try and make the council a bit more diverse. Maybe we need some help with this, Martin. I don't know whether it's going to the networks or something. We need some help to be able to recruit I know it's difficult to get people, but this is an opportunity, really, isn't it? And I think we should take that opportunity and get help to fill it with the people that will help with the diversity of the group.
Oh, somebody's can you just mute it? Everything mute just for a second. We seem to have a... Thank you. We seem to have had a... Julia, I totally agree. I mean, as you know, I've been discussing with people from the Black community about how to engage in the sort of groups. it's finding out who are the people who are sort of seen as sort of leaders in those areas, and I think it's going to take a while, but we've got to really try on this because the Board of Governors is very unrepresentative of the county, and we've really got to work hard at doing this. And if necessary, we'll have to engage some people to help us, I think, and we're certainly doing that with the NEDs, so we're getting hopefully a more diverse range of candidates coming forward for NEDs. Now, there was somebody, I don't know who it was, JFW public guest. Who's that?
Right. Following from what John Barrett's just said. Yes.
John.
Any opportunity to be on local news, radio, television, to actually share with the viewers the work that the governors have done, and how we must be able to define it. They have been able to support the facilities cope with COVID. So that would be my angle. It's another, these people are helping the nation cope with COVID, and we want to tell you about it, but underneath what we're actually saying is here is a group of people who represent you, the viewing public.
Thanks, John. I'm not sure how successful we'll be on getting that message out, but any ideas are certainly welcome. We'll be putting them into the pot to think about. I think we better move on. So, Tom, thank you. Unless there's anything else you want. Quality group, Andrew. Andrew, you're on mute.
Thank you.
Okay.
QUAG met on the 22nd of February, and I chaired it because Serna Cavallo was unwell. We've just heard today, sadly, that she's resigned because of her health. We welcome John Wellham to the group as a new member. And perhaps I should say at this point that all governors are welcome to come to the quality group. We had thoughts of getting presentations from particular bits of the trust to inform our investigations. I decided to put that off until the pressure from the virus has faded somewhat. We reviewed the data on waiting lists, and a lot of work has been done on this, and the presentation is now excellent, which makes it very much easier. And we looked at the patient experience and complaints report. The sample anonymised complaint was an interesting one, as it usually is, about an old lady who found herself in a physical rehabilitation ward after a fall when COVID was found on the unit, and the difficulties in communication between her and the ward and her daughter, which arose as a result of that. Various lessons were learned. We normally have a program of visits to look at the quality of various services from a governor's perspective, but this has been paused and remains so. The only governor who wishes to do a virtual visit may do so. Liz Chapman acquired 2 of our members to review those people who've been labelled as unreasonably persistent complainants, of whom the trust has 5 apparently, and I expect we'll hear more of that in due course. As I say, QUAG is open to all governors, and we welcome all governors.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Any questions for Andrew? Thank you. Items you wanted to hear about, and Jane Nicholson, I think, is here somewhere. Jane, can I hand over to you?
Hello, yes, I'm here. Hello, everybody.
Welcome.
Hello. Right. Thank you very much for the invite today. I have come to talk about the new people strategy that we have launched within the Trust. If you're okay, I will share a set of slides with you. So I'll share my screen if that's okay with everybody. Then you can see the slides that I have produced. Let me just check that this is working. Are we there? Can you see the slide deck?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Right. Okay. So, as some of you may be aware, we started to look at developing a new people strategy just after I joined the organisation just over 12 months ago. The people strategy has been in development with a number of people within the organisation. So we work very closely with our networks. We've engaged with our staff through a number of workshops, and obviously we've worked on this within our own people directorate as well. And we've used QI principles in the development of the strategy. So really looking at, what is the biggest problem that we need to solve within the organisation. And I'll talk you through a little bit about the background, talk about what the strategy looks like, and then I'm really happy to answer any questions that you may have about the people strategy. So the context to our strategy, I think, is really important. We work in an area which is one of the most workforce constrained. In other words, it's the area of the country where we have the most difficulty recruiting staff and the most vacancies. And the Thames Valley has a particularly high rate of vacancies. And we know that will continue for some time. We know that the NHS nationally has shortages of clinical students coming into to study clinical degrees, and that actually the number of students coming in to train and to be allied healthcare professionals or nurses is actually lower than the number of staff who are leaving through natural reasons, so retiring or just exiting the profession. We also have to cope with the fact that we have a relatively high turnover rate, which is around 14%. And given that background, that this is one of the key problems that we need to solve from a people point of view. If we don't improve our turnover, in other words, if we don't retain more of our people, we risk continuing to lose skilled and experienced staff members. We will continue to expend our resources on replacing leavers. We're putting pressure on our stretched finances because we're having to bring in, some cases agency to fill gaps that we have. Or our staff are being put under pressure, having to work extended hours because of the fact that they need to cover gaps in the work schedule. So for us, the main thing that we need to do is, if we're recruiting people, we need to retain them. And that's the fundamental approach that we've been taking in our strategy. The strategy has also been developed in line with the overall new trust strategy, with the equality, diversity and inclusion strategy, and there are elements of the what I call ED&I, equality, diversity and inclusion strategy, which will form part of our people strategy. It also aligns with the new NHS people plan, which is the national strategy for people in the NHS, and as well as the people strategies that we have in our two ICSs, so both in Bob and Frimley. So our people promise, this is the NHS people promise, the rainbow on the right. Some of you may have seen this. This is basically the promise that the NHS wants to give to its people, and we absolutely sign up to the promise and the values that the NHS nationally is trying to endorse. And more than that, for us personally, we want people to come to work here and to feel that this is an organisation which is outstanding, but not just outstanding for some people, but outstanding for everyone. And we talked about that as part of our core, promise in our people strategy. We want this to be a great place to work where all of our people can thrive and grow. We know there are some pockets, some small pockets of poor experience, and what we don't want to do is to ignore those. We really want to tackle those to make sure that this is somewhere where everyone comes to work and feels that they're having a great experience. So that means that we live our values, everyone feels that they have a place here, that they belong, that they have a great staff experience, and we don't tolerate a poor one. And as I say, we're committing to the people promise. And by doing that, we think that we can deliver safe, compassionate, high quality care and a good patient experience, because having a skilled and engaged workforce is the way which we can deliver that, and the way that we will remain efficient and financially sustainable. So this is a piece around what we're trying to do. So where are we currently and where do we want to go? So what's our culture now and where do we want to go? We're incredibly lucky in this organisation in that we do have an really strong and very positive culture. So when we talk about what we want to change, it's not about trying to change the whole organisation. It's about tweaking those bits that we think need to be that we need to continue to improve. So I don't want when we look at current and future culture, I don't want you to think that this is indicative of everything that's happening in the organisation, but it's about focusing about where we want the whole organisation to be. So it's about moving from reacting to workforce gaps and poor retention rates to being much more proactive in planning our workforce and having a much higher rate of retention of our people and understanding why people leave. It's about making sure we give people right training opportunities. We're maximising the use of apprenticeships. It's about making sure that as many people as we can thrive at work. We can't make people happy all of the time, but trying to create an environment where people are happy and feel that they can thrive at work, or the majority of people can do that, and tackling those areas where those people don't feel that they can is really important to us. And then having what we call a just culture. And this is a culture where, if there's a mistake and it happens, instead of it being a blame, so people are less likely to admit that they've made mistakes, or they try and cover up mistakes and we never learn from them, that we have a situation where we try and support people if they make a mistake, and we try and understand why, and we try and learn from mistakes. And that links into the type of leaders that we want in the organisation, which is that we have leaders who are compassionate and inclusive, and that is fully embedded across the organisation, and that we make sure that opportunities to progress are inclusive for everybody. And then instead of reacting to digital opportunities, we proactively embrace the benefits of technology, as we have done during COVID, and that we continue to look at the ways that we can make technology a benefit to this organisation. So this is our key picture, which tries to summarises our people strategy onto one slide, trying to show you the key priorities and initiatives. So as I say, the key message we want people to take away is that we want to make Berkshire Healthcare outstanding for everyone, and that to do that we need to focus our attention on those areas of poorer experience and using quality improvement principles to try and understand where we have poorer experience and why we have it, and what are the things that we need to do to address that. So let me explain this in a little bit more detail. So these roundels here, these little round pieces here, are some of the strands of work, and these 4 areas here actually align with the national people strategy and the areas we are being asked to focus on nationally as a people directorate. So our 4 areas of focus are growing and retaining for the future, looking after our people, belonging to the trust, and new ways of working. And belonging doesn't mean that we own anybody. It means that people feel that they belong here, that there's a place for them, and that they are comfortable here. The strands of work are to really focus on how we retain and attract people. So how do we attract people who want to work here, to come and want them, to attract people so that they want to come and work here, and how do we actually retain them? So how do we make sure that our recruitment methods are finding the right people and that we're embedding them into the organisation, inducting them in the right way? How do we make sure that we are giving people the right training and clinical education so that they can be safe at work and that they can grow and develop? How do we look after our people once they're here? That's about how do we look after their well-being? How do we reward them and recognise them for the work that they do? If they, the piece around just and learning culture, if people make a mistake, how do we learn from that so we don't repeat the mistakes? How do we create a safe culture where people are prepared to speak up and talk about things that they don't think are right? And again, so that we can learn from those. And then how do we ensure that we have a diverse and inclusive group of people in our organisation, and we maximise the talents of our people in the organisation, and have a leadership that are able to do that, and do that in a compassionate and inclusive way? And how do we tackle the differentials of experience that some of our staff have in the organisation? And we know specifically that some groups, such as our BAME staff and our disabled staff, report a significantly worse experience than some of our white staff. It may be in pockets, it might be small, but it's still important. It's still a person at the end of the day who's reporting that they don't feel as well looked after at work. And then we have what we call our new ways of working, our transformation projects. So this is about how we have responded to COVID and COVID recovery, but it's also about how we maximise the use of technology, so how we embrace remote working, how we continue to use remote working, and how we use the possibilities of digital working to transform the way that we deliver some of our people services into the organisation. And then if you look at these areas here, these are how the different strategies link together. So this is all our people strategy, but we will report on this in different ways. So these three roundels here will report through our strategic people group. This roundel here will report through the safety culture group, which is a group that Debbie leads and linked into very much into the clinical and the nursing environment. These roundels here form very much part of the ED&I strategy and will report through the diversity steering group. And then the workforce transformation projects will be projects in their own right. All of this forms the people strategy, but it's about making sure that that people strategy isn't just seen as something that sits in the people function. It's a part of the organisation. It links into lots of other things that are happening in the organisation. Overall, the responsibility for monitoring the success of the people strategy will go to the strategic people group, and they will report in to board via some of our board committees. But there will be other groups that will be looking at some of the slices of the work that we are doing, and making sure that that links into some of the broader strategies and deliverables in the organisation. So, as I say, we developed this using a quality improvement approach. That was very much about trying to, we focused our strategy and the pieces of work that we've agreed in our strategy on the fact that we need to retain more people. It's no point in recruiting people if, 12 months later they've left. So the whole focus of our work was trying to is about what do we need to retain people, and what we were hearing, from people is reflected in that people strategy. And as I said at the very beginning, we did a lot of work to listen to people about, what is it that we need to be doing. So we listened to teams that have high turnover. We ran open workshops for all our staff, including our network reps, and we used the data that we have already in the organisation. So our workforce race equality surveys, the workforce disability equality surveys, information that's coming from our staff surveys, and information that was coming through from other projects that we have run in the organisation. We identified that the top 3 reasons for leaving are what people euphemistically call work-life balance. And we're trying to dive into what that means, because work-life balance can mean different things for certain people, and often we're finding that that's used as a tick box for other reasons why people are going. Relocation is a reason people are having to move to different parts of the country, and why is that? And if we have a more digital world, and people can work more remotely, does that give us an opportunity to hold on to more people, that they don't have to leave if they move away in all cases? And then promotion, and what we want to look at as part of our work there is, why are people having to go? In some cases that will always be the case. It will be that they haven't got the right opportunities here, but are we always maximising our career pathways to make sure that people are getting the right career opportunities, and that they're able to see the opportunities that we have in the organisation, and are we developing and supporting people so that they are ready for the promotions when they come up? I won't go through all of these pieces here. Hopefully you've got the slides and can look at them. But these were some of the themes that were coming out, and particularly from our workshops that we ran, and giving you some of the feedback around what people were saying to us. And again, let me reassure you that all of this has been driven into the work that we are going to do and the strands of work that we have pulled together. And then again, I'm not going to intend to go through all of these in detail, but I wanted to show you what we are doing here. So for each of the areas, you know, for example, growing and retaining for the future, we have a very clear problem statement. What's the problem we're trying to really focus on, and the key problem we need to solve? What are the things that we're going to try and do, the deliverables to try and address that problem? And that's, again, as I say, linked back to what we've been hearing from workshops, what we're seeing in some of the staff survey results. And then what are the benefits of doing that? Because there's no point in doing anything unless we actually can see some sort of tangible benefits from doing that at the end. And for each of those, we've gone through for each and worked through what we will deliver and what will be the benefits, what will be the difference we'll see at the end. So these are the you know, main areas there. Now behind that, there will be some more detailed plans. So project plans, and we will be using, you know, some project discipline to make sure that we are monitoring our success in these areas. We've also developed a series of core performance measures that we will be using to measure the outcome of our work. You know, and some of these are quite ambitious targets. So some of them, you know, we've been very clear that we said we prefer to have an ambitious, you know, realistic but an ambitious target. And if we miss the target, then we'll talk about why is it we're missing the target, rather than trying to do something which is you know, putting in place a target which is easily achievable but doesn't make a great deal of difference. And trying to get that balance right is hard sometimes. We want it to be realistic, but we do want it to be a stretch target as well. And again, I don't intend to talk through all of those because you can read them, but I'm very happy to talk about any of those targets, how we got to the target that we've set and how we agreed that. But they are all, you know, for each of our areas, we've got a core target that we will be using as our core performance measure. And again, behind that, for each of the specific projects, they will have their own deadlines and their own targets behind some of this, but this is the overall measure that we will be using to divert it.
Oh,
there we go.
sorry.
And that's the end of it.
Jane, thank you very much. We've got some questions already.
Okay, super.
John Barrett, I think, first, and then Deborah Edwards.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Yeah, a few things I picked up from that, Jane. I come from a scientific research background where succession planning is absolutely paramount.
Yeah.
And certainly there are areas in that I'm familiar with where you almost create special posts to gain and retain expertise in specific areas. I can think of microencapsulation, for example. We were one of the leaders in that back in the day. Slow releasing our nasty parapet into places, but yes, that's all right. Also, I wonder if you have a view on how we're doing with compassionate leaders so far, and whether any of the less than favourable BAME experiences, is there any pattern to certain services, certain areas?
Yeah. Okay, so let me try and deal with both those. Yes, at times we will create a specific post to retain people, and in fact I've just been having a conversation today, you know, where we're saying sometimes we have to make an imperfect decision because there's no perfect solution, but you know, where we're looking at whether we need to create grade 7 roles in certain areas in order to retain some of our grade 6 staff that we think we will lose otherwise, and whether we therefore change the mix of roles that we have in parts of the organisation. But again, what we're wanting to do is do that in a more proactive way, and we're going out now and doing that as part of a context of workforce planning, rather than a reaction that says, oh, so-and-so is going to leave, you've got to make them a grade 7 tomorrow. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So trying to do that. In terms of the compassionate leadership, I think that's a real strength of this organisation. We've done some amazing work on compassionate leadership, and if you, when we show you the staff survey results, which I think we're going to come back to COG in the next COG, and we'll go through all of those. But when you see the survey results were amazing, and I think that's a reflection of the fact that we have got some really amazing leaders in this organisation. What we are doing, however, is not resting on our laurels, and we are going to be refreshing our compassionate leadership offer and expanding that into what we're calling a compassionate and inclusive leadership offer. So basically taking, you know, all the good things we've done, continuing the good things, and adding in some more things that we want to do into, you know, or where we think there are gaps now that we want to address. And then if you're asking about BAME experience, yes, we do know that there are some specific areas where we've got some particular problems, and that's not necessarily because we have got, you know, as an organisation have got problems. It's something to do with, it's often about the type of patients that we're dealing with, and therefore, you know, some of the experience of that people have. So we know, for example, that Prospect Park is an area that we have concerns, and Prospect Park are very aware of that, and we're doing a lot of work in there to try and support that team and to look after people in that team.
Thanks. I think we got quite a few questions, Jane, so we need to press on. Deborah Edwards.
Thank you ever so much, Jane, for being extremely honest about the problem with retention and the figures and what you have everybody's putting in to reduce this. I mean, we're going to be faced with quite a few months of a very small pay rise. We are also faced in Reading. By the way, Prospect Park's in my ward. Reading is expensive as far as accommodation is concerned. It's recruiting all those people in. Where we're going to put everybody, we need them desperately. And this is obviously this has all happened since you wrote this report. So what's going to happen about how we're going to support our staff when they are going to be obviously a little ticked off with this pay? And I'm not talking politically. I'm talking about Reading's an expensive place to stay. So is Berkshire, rest of Berkshire. So is, you know, the whole Bob. How are we going to cope with this? We could be losing a lot of staff.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and Deborah, we did discuss in Bob at the Bob HRDs whether we put in a request to be put into a higher cost area allowance band. Decided in the end that given where the government finances are, that would probably fall on deaf ears this time. But what we are actively looking at, and you know, let me talk about you know, Prospect Park, you know, where we've got areas that we know are a particular problem. Do we need to do something in terms of creating maybe a specific recruitment and retention allowance for those hard to fill roles, or where we know that we are really struggling to attract staff? We've not made a definite conclusion on that, but we will continue to look at our ability to fund specific recruitment and retention allowances where there is a real justification to do so. And that's the only thing that we've got in our power really to do in terms of the salary piece. But as and when we think the government's got a bit more money or a bit more openness to think about the high cost area allowance, we would be really happy to have a discussion, and anything that the councillors can do to support us, we would love. Oh, Martin, I think you're on mute.
I'd say I would go through the questioners on the order they come off my screen. So if they're not the order you put them up on, forgive me. But the next one I've got is Tom Lake.
Thank you. Sorry, there was a delay between clicking and getting the unmute, which is very confusing. Just to say, we're looking at the three matters relating to retention, and then looking at the list of deliverables. I don't see them shining through. I think they've been mixed in. I see there's a whole lot of other goodies, and my first impression, perhaps I'm wrong, is that you know, that focus on retention has not come through in the deliverables. So I'm putting that to you. Now, looking at some of these looking at some of these things, I would say you haven't looked at relocation at all. And one of the key questions is, can you help people to integrate, who arrive here, to integrate in the local area? Now, in the old days, it used to be the sports and social club and so on. But the question of putting it in a more modern way, can you help people to integrate in the local area? And I don't think anything there's been no thought on that, I think. You know, can we make arrangements with other organizations that would, you know, in common? Anyway, that's just a thought. Now, one thing to say about the blame culture. It seems to me that somebody I worked with once had a very wise saying, which is that every system has a sink of complexity. That's somewhere where you dump all the problems. And to some extent, the individual member of staff is the sink of complexity in healthcare. So they've got to be trained in this and trained in that. They've got to have the safeguarding training, their training on fire safety. They've got to know about physical, watch out for physical health. They've got all these things. And if you tell me how you can integrate safeguarding, carers strategy and data protection, you know, it's a job and a half. And it seems to me that the whole thing might be that people are expecting the integration to be done by the individual and not by the training regime. Okay. And so I think you should look again, worth thinking about whether the training regime is asking too much of people to do the integration themselves, and whether the training regime could be delivered in a more integrated way, more directly in the workplace.
Oh, I'm really pleased.
So I think those are my points.
No, I'm really pleased to hear those points. The first thing I will say is that, you know, I'm sorry if it didn't come across as strongly in the presentation, but absolutely everything we are doing here is intended to retain people. So, you know, when we talk about retention and attraction, we are doing some specific work to understand, you know, why we have problems retaining some people. But we do know we lose a lot of people within 12 months. So there's a whole piece of work that we'll look at, you know, are we attracting the wrong people into roles? We know people are leaving because they don't feel that they're getting the right training and development to get themselves their promotions. And so, you know, the focus there on training and education is about making sure that that's one of the offers that we give people. We know people leave when they don't feel that they are being looked after, and therefore well-being is a real focus of the organisation for us in terms of retaining staff. We know people leave when they've had a very poor experience, that they feel they've been treated really badly, if they've gone through a significant investigation and they feel very hacked off at the end of that. And therefore, you know, the whole point around supporting them if they make a mistake, or if they're just investigated and there isn't a mistake, and making sure that we do that in a way that's compassionate, is intended to retain people. You know, you know, the differentials in experience, people are leaving because they feel that they're badly treated in some areas, then that's the point about why we want to keep people, by making sure they get a positive experience. So I could go through all of them, but I'm just trying to push back and say absolutely every one of these things links straight back to retention. If it doesn't link back to keeping our people, you know, we wouldn't be doing it. So I'll reassure you on that. The other point that you were making about training, 100% agree with you on that training piece. We throw a lot of training at our people, and one of the pieces of work that we are doing as part of that training slice of work is to have a look at how we deliver training, what training we deliver. So we have introduced now a new training system which is easier to access, but we want to really examine the training, and do we overtrain people and ask them to do too much and assimilate too much? And if we do have to get people to do the training, how do we do that in a more efficient and easy manner, both for the service and both for the individual?
Jane, thank you. We've got quite a few hands, so I'm going to press on. Tom O'Kane.
Yep. Hi, thanks for a very good presentation. I was particularly struck by your comments about a just culture, because historically the NHS has been a blame culture, and in trying to move to a just culture, it is going to be a challenge. And I speak from a background of experience in aviation safety, which is where aviation desperately tried to get to. It doesn't mean a no blame culture either, but you ask questions, what would any other reasonably trained person in this position do? And is it the process at the fault? Is it training, etc.? So I'm really, really pleased to see that you're introducing something like that.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a really good point that you make there, Tom, that It doesn't mean to say that if somebody has at me or made a fault that that needs to be followed up, that we wouldn't follow it up, but it is about trying to understand the reasons behind that.
Isabel?
Sorry, thank you for that. Several of the points I was going to raise have already been done, but I think, and thank you for the presentation, that was great. But one question, do all members of staff feel that they've actually been listened to? Have they all individually been asked for their comments? Because I think that's, if you want to take them on board, you have to.
For the people strategy, you mean?
Yes.
Okay, so where we have, what we have done is that we can't ask every single member of staff to comment, and we haven't asked every single member of staff to comment on the people strategy, but we have used their representatives. So this has gone through the staff networks, through the staff side representatives, through the LNC representatives, and we did have, as I say, a series of open workshops where staff were invited to participate, and we made sure that we had representatives from each of the professions and each of the divisions when we did that. So we tried to consult as much as possible. And then the other way that we do take into account the staff voices, as I say, looking very closely at the results of the staff survey and what's being said in the staff survey, which is again the opportunity that we really have to hear the staff voice.
Thank you.
Thank you. June.
Thank you, Martin. Firstly, Jane, I thought it was a really good presentation, and many of the questions I had have been answered by colleagues already, but I just wanted to touch on the attraction of staff to the Trust. We do live in a high cost area, and accommodation is a real challenge for people. I personally was recruited to come to work in England by an organisation who couldn't recruit locally. So one of the things that they did is give accommodation support. They gave us gym membership and stuff like that to help us settle into the organisation. I know that private sector and the public sector are quite different, but I just wonder whether that's something that could be explored within the system, because I'm assuming if we have these challenges, the RBH are having similar challenges, and could we do something collectively around attracting people into the area and then keeping them? And then the second bit was linked to COVID. I don't know if you touched on it. I didn't hear it in the presentation about one of the reasons why people leave, but I would get the sense that probably money and the ability to live and work in this area would be a challenge from accommodation, etc. So do you get the sense through COVID that people will be making career choices, changes in career direction because of the experience of COVID? I don't know if you've got any early information on that, and how important or how big an issue is finances, salary linked to people's decisions not to stay?
Okay, definitely answer some of those. And sorry, I didn't actually answer that earlier question about how we embed people into the local area. The main way that we are starting to look at attracting people into the area and settling people into the area is that we are going to be doing a trial where we are going to be recruiting a small number of international nurses, and we're going to do that work in partnership with Oxford Health. And we'd be very clear there that the most important thing when we're trying to do this and to bring in a new group of people is that we have to create both a community amongst themselves, but also we need to integrate them into the community. And part of the plan is that we will ensure that we give them accommodation and that we make sure that they are networked into local community groups, either from their own background, depending on where they come from, or just wider, whether it be a church group or whether it be a community group. That would be. Thank you. That will be our first exploration of that. That doesn't mean to say that there isn't more that could be done in terms of integrating people into community. But increasingly now we've got a remote working policy, and we will look at whether we can bring people in from wider areas who, like myself, I don't live in Berkshire, but I can work in Berkshire and make sure that they do feel part of the workplace and feel the community. So that's.
I think I'm really concerned about time, I'm afraid. Julie, have you got a quick question? Otherwise, we have to move on.
It's pretty quick, hopefully. Thank you, Jane. That was really comprehensive and seems to be quite aspirational, and that can sometimes lead to a bit of a disconnect to how it lands on the front line. So, for instance, you mentioned work-life balance has been an issue for people leaving. Now, I know the senior leadership team is very keen on flexible working, but when it gets down to the front line, staff find it really quite difficult to access flexible working because we still have to provide a service. So how can we sort of reduce that disconnect from these aspirations that are high level here and actually making a difference to people's working lives?
Yeah, okay. And to be fair, that also comes down to this point about the leadership and what we have talked about is how do we develop our leaders, you know, post-COVID into a post-COVID world. So as you know, Julia, we do now have a remote working policy, and the emphasis has changed in that policy, in that it talks about enabling people to work flexibly and to work remotely rather than actually people having to request it. So it's a bit more around expecting that to be enabled, bearing in mind that whatever we say we're going to do has to work both for the service and for the job, and that just comes down to us trying to work at the, you know, with our managers at the very front end about how to manage this and how to support that. It's the same with things like reasonable adjustments and the training we want to give leaders about and managers around how to implement reasonable adjustments, because that's the same type of thing. It's about helping them to understand what they can do, and often what they don't, they know what they can't do, but they're never sure what they can do. And it's just changing the messaging.
Jane, thank you very much. As you can tell, a very interesting presentation for which I'm sure the governors are very grateful. And I know that the governors will be very interested in the staff satisfaction results, which the board saw yesterday and were very impressed with. So thank you very much indeed, Jane, for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Sorry to rush you.
No, that's okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Well, that's a good discussion, I think. We've now got Freedom to Speak Up Guardian presentation. Mike Crosati, who I hope is on the line, he is with his backdrop, telling us all about it. Mike, are you just going to touch on the key things and then we can have some questions? Is that the right way of doing it?
Yes, that's fine if you're short for time. If I give you a few pointers on where we are with Freedom to Speak Up, and then just take some questions.
I think the discussion will be quite useful, actually.
Yeah, sure. So the role of the Guardian is really split into two areas. So the reactive work I do, so listening to cases when people come to me and they want to speak up because they've seen something that is wrong that can affect the organisation as a whole. Freedom to Speak Up was originally brought in after the Robert Francis report, an inquiry into mid-staffs, and basically around patient safety issues. But for us as an organisation, I don't get those types of concerns. So I have it from others that the patient safety concerns go through other routes and they're not missed out. And what I get to hear essentially is stuff around staff experience, how people are feeling, how they are treated. So my role is to listen to them independently, impartially and objectively, and support them on how that case is going to be investigated, who is going to listen to it and investigate and do the investigation work. I don't get involved in that. I stay impartial and outside of that. I work very closely with colleagues in HR, and because of that, a lot of the cases I get are resolved quite quickly, and we try and keep it as informal as possible. So we'll try not to go through the formal HR processes, which can be quite divisive. The other area of work is the proactive work. So trying to change the culture. So Tom was speaking earlier about the aviation industry where there's a good culture of talking openly about safety, and that's the sort of thing that we want to engender within the organisation. So trying to change the culture so that speaking up becomes business as usual, that those small things that people might see that are wrong are spoken about, but also that managers and leaders listen to what is being brought to them and provide the right sort of feedback. So it's listening up and following up, giving that feedback both to the individual that has raised a concern, but also learning for the organisation as a whole. So I meet up with Debbie as exec lead for Freedom Speak Up, Julian and Tracy Slegg as head of HR on a monthly basis, and we triage the cases I've been that have come across my desk, and there's learning there for everyone as to how we deal with these types of cases in the future. In terms of themes, as I said, there's very little around patient safety that comes across my desk. It is mainly around the staff experience. Probably 80% of the cases I get involve some form of bullying and harassment. And therefore I spend quite a bit of my time supporting the people strategy that Jane was talking about earlier. I'm a member of the diversity steering group. I work as an ally with all three the staff networks. I'm a member of the safety culture steering group, and she was talking also about Prospect Park and some of the experiences of our BAME colleagues. So again, I'm involved there looking at specifically bullying and harassment and microaggressions against BAME members of staff, and issues such as racial abuse, whether that's by fellow members of staff, unfortunately, or our patients, relatives, or visitors. A lot of the work I do is I guarantee confidentiality. So there's no divulging of names or anything like that unless there is the agreement of that member of staff. So the whole idea is to try and support the just culture work, trying to change the culture to one where there's more openness and there's more willingness to talk about things that people see without fear of detriment or any form of blame. That sort of it is in a nutshell as to what I do. I know we're pushed for time, so maybe you can expand on that with some questions. If I take them just in the listing I have here, the first question is from Andrew.
Thank you. I was wondering how many cases a month you deal with, and also remembering you didn't mention racial abuse from patients, and mental health nurses often take a lot of abuse from patients. It's just seen as something these ill people do and brushed under the carpet, so to speak. And I've known it on some occasions be very destructive to the staff. I'm curious about that.
Yes, I would agree with you. And yes, so the work I'm doing with Prospect Park is specifically focused on racial abuse from patients, but also, you know, the impact on the individual that has been abused. Doesn't really matter whether it's from a patient or a member of staff. So I would support on whoever might be the perpetrator, if that's the right sort of word. In terms of number of cases, they've doubled in the last couple of years that I've been in post. So we were reporting sort of 6 or 7 cases a quarter. This last year, I think the first couple of quarters we got to the same level of cases as we would have done in the whole of the previous year. I don't see that as a bad thing. I see that as me marketing the role and therefore encouraging more people to speak up. So I don't think there's more stuff happening. There's more people talking about it. If that answers your question, Andrew.
Yeah. Just before you go on to Paul, his question, just to say to Andrew, that, you know, racial abuse is completely unacceptable, just as physical abuse is. So I think we've got to be very careful we don't find excuses for that. So I just want to make that absolutely clear. Paul.
You're on mute, Paul.
Sorry about that. Still on the number of cases, I looked at the national reporting and the numbers are actually quite low. I mean, it was surprisingly low when I investigated this. And I just wondered if there are a lot of cases which aren't reported because they come to you and then they get resolved quite quickly and they don't need to be reported. That's one thing. And then the second thing is, I'm sure there are a number of people who have to leave the trust because of some dispute with the trust, and it can end up being a legal dispute and can involve gagging orders and all sorts of things which we don't often hear about. And I wonder if you ever get involved in that sort of case as well. So those 2 questions, please.
So in terms of gagging orders and things like that, thankfully, no, I don't get involved in those larger, more important cases that you might call whistleblowing. We don't seem to have those, or if we do, then they don't come via the Guardian. In terms of reporting, so I would report to the national body, the National Guardian's Office, on a quarterly basis, the number of cases that I get to hear about each quarter, as does every other organisation. We report less than similar sized organisations, but then I think that is linked to our reporting culture. We have a good, people know where to go to report, so it doesn't necessarily come through the Guardian. And also it is linked to CQC rating as well. So they've shown that trusts with a lower rating generally tend to have, the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian has more work to do. There are more cases go via him.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Julia.
Thanks, Mike. A couple of things, really. Firstly, do you think people in general feel confident to speak up? And if not, why not? Is there anything we can do about that? And then you mentioned bullying. Do you think there's any sort of bullying culture in the trust? And how do you think bullying cases are managed by the trust?
So bullying, yes, unfortunately there is, because as I said, round about 80% of the cases I get, there is an element of bullying. It's not always clear cut. So there may be, maybe someone is being performance managed and they don't particularly like that and they might perceive it as bullying. So it's quite difficult to define what exactly is bullying. It's quite subjective. I think we need a zero tolerance approach to it. And are we there? Yeah, I think there's more work to be done just by looking at the figures I get. And sorry, your first point was around?
Feeling confident to speak up. Do you think people feel confident to speak up? And if not, what can we do? I
think there's more work to be done. So in terms of people coming to me, yes. I think because of the work perhaps I've done over the last couple of years and others have done, that people will trust me, maybe more than they did a couple of years ago, but they really should be going to their managers more often, although that can obviously be difficult because a lot of it is around the staff experience, and it could be the manager that might be the issue, or a colleague. So because of the nature of the stuff that I deal with, I think there's a lot more that I can do, and the organisation as well. And I think it fits in very well with Jane's people strategy.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike. Just before we go on to Guy, just on your point about, Julia, about whether people feel confident to speak up, I think in some of our overseas staff, I think, are not used to some of the more sort of legal frameworks that the UK has, and therefore are not so aware of the reassurance that should come from some of those protections from the law, and therefore feel, I think, somewhat more hesitant perhaps to speak up than some of the people who've lived in this country for a long time. So I think we need to recognise that different people with different backgrounds might perceive, how confident they feel to speak up, to be different because of their past history or their background. So I think it's something we need to keep working on. That's what I was going to say. Guy.
You're on mute, Guy.
Thank you. Mike, I'm a governor for staff, and thank you for what you do for us. I think you've just touched on what I was going to ask, and that is about what the barriers are for people coming to you or for not coming to you. For example, if I wanted to raise a concern, I feel as though I'd have to find the courage to do so, and to speak out to anybody, not just yourself, of course. And also I'd be concerned that once I got the ball rolling, then it might not stop. I might not be able to stop that or revoke it, change my mind, and still have a fear of repercussions.
So there's a guarantee of confidentiality, and nothing, unless it is something that's illegal or a patient safety issue, the person coming to me is pretty much in the driver's seat. Nothing is said or done without the understanding and agreement of that individual, and there has to be a certain amount of reassurance on around detriment, that there won't be any detriment, any backlash, and that is all part and parcel of the ethos of freedom to speak up. And that's why I engage with the senior leaders to help support that. But yes, it is sticking your head up over the parapet, and people are anxious. But by the way I think I do my work, it encourages more people to come and talk to me, which we've seen in the figures. So hopefully some of that is around reassurance that it is a safe space.
Thank you. For what it's worth, I know you're approachable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guy. In the interest of time, John, we've got one last quick question and then we need to move on.
Yes, very briefly adding on to what you said, one of the factors which may discourage some people is the education system. Education system, particularly when you're getting staff from not just in the UK but outside the UK, can differ tremendously, and they don't have an educational experience which encourages them to actually stand up and say things.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would go and meet with teams that may feel disadvantaged or particularly vulnerable, and explain what I do. So it's not just with the 3 staff networks. It may be with sort of band 2 or band 3 staff working in estates and facilities, whatever. Trying to explain to them what I do in ways that supports them.
Okay, Mike, I thank you very much. Obviously, you tell a very interesting presentation, and it's a very important role because this openness is critical to getting a good culture in the organisation. So thank you for what you're doing. More power to your elbow. By the way, just for Governor's interest, the board received the reports from Mike. Is it twice yearly now, Mike?
Yes,
6 months.
yes,
6
every
months
6
now.
months. Yeah.
So we get that report, so we see that all that detail. And many thanks, Mike, for what you're doing.
Thank you very much for your time.
No, it's fine. Could we move on then to item 9, patient experience Q3 report? I think Liz Chapman's going to speak to this. Is that right?
It is indeed. Good morning, everybody. My name, is it still morning? Yes.
It is morning, and Liz, just say we're slightly pressed for time. Don't rush it too much, but just remember we're slightly pressed for time.
Not a problem at all. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Liz Chapman and I'm the Head of Service Engagement and Experience for the Trust. So very briefly, we received 51 formal complaints in Q3. Our formal complaint rate for Q3 is therefore 0.04% of contacts, a slight reduction from 0.05% in Q2. We actually received 11 fewer complaints in Q3 compared with Q2, and Table 1 has been updated to include the percentage of complaints against the number of contacts for the quarter as requested by June at the last meeting, so that change has been made. Community nursing received the biggest increase in complaints and the highest number of complaints out of all of our community-based services, with an increase to 5 compared with 1 last quarter. However, that being said, there were no locality outliers, and this actually equates to 0.006% of the contacts, which is why it's so important to look at both numbers and percentages and not look at them in isolation. Out of the 51 formal complaints we received, 3 were about COVID. And as discussed earlier, one of these was shared as an anonymous complaint with the Governor Quality Assurance Group. We continue to monitor informal complaints and concerns that are resolved locally, and we continue to meet with representatives of the local Health Watch organisations. And as Amanda said earlier, the quality account is shared with stakeholders, and the draft is currently with Health Watch for their review and feedback. The FFT uptake, so that's the friends and family test, is sadly still lower than we would like, and we continue to work with services on this. And finally, as Andrew said earlier, following attendance at the Governor Quality Assurance Group, we welcome Tom and Paul, who've kindly offered to take part in the annual status reviews for unreasonably persistent complainants. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Liz. Very efficient. Questions from governors, please. Someone's hand's up. Can't see who it is.
John Barrett. Hi, John.
Oh, John.
Hi, Liz. Thank you.
John.
Yeah. I'm aware that Health Watch has just changed or is changing in East Berkshire.
Yes, that's correct.
I got something from the ARC Trust saying, we've lost the contract. We want to pass your information on to the new provider. I've heard nothing from the new provider yet. I mean, is that still very much in its infancy, or is that set up and going, or?
So my understanding is at the moment, Slough are kind of caretaking that contract. So the Health Watch in Slough.
Right.
So they're looking after it. Now, as you may know, Health Watches ordinarily are consisting of smaller charities and organisations that have an umbrella. So I'm not sure if they're going to branch off or if they're going to do more of an East-based Health Watch rather than having specific named locality ones.
Okay. I certainly got I understood what they were saying, if they're probably going to an East thing. And I'm
I
not
think
quite
that's
certain.
most likely.
Yeah, not certain it's a good idea or not. It may be, it may not.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be a shame to lose some of that locality base.
Okay,
but
yeah, so you're equally in the dark as I am at the moment.
I am indeed, John.
Thank you.
I am indeed.
Thank you very much. Tom Lake?
I just wanted to ask if we have a handle on the experience of patients who go to out of areas, we say other institutions. And I ask this partly because I was talking to someone I know in an institution in Northampton, one actually which is requires improvement at the moment, and they said they knew there were patients from Berkshire there, but have we got any way of capturing their experience?
Thanks, Tom. That's a really good question. So whilst the patients are out of area, they are kind of subject to patient experience monitoring, so the surveys, etc., for the organisation that they're placed with. I know that our out of area placement team works really closely with providers on quality and on experience. It's not something we kind of capture within my team, but it is something that services work on a case by case basis on.
Is that okay, Tom? Tom, you there?
Yes, I'm sorry, just unmuting. Yes, that was. Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make the point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Any other questions for Liz? Okay, then if we may, we'll move on to Julian and performance report to council. I think the normal way is that we assume it's read and questions, if that's okay, unless Julian wants to say anything particular.
Correct. Let's do exactly that. Thanks, Martin.
Okay, so any questions for Julian, please? Paul. You're on mute, Paul.
Sorry about that. On the first page, we get the update about the national situation. I'm sort of vaguely aware that there's a new Mental Health Act under consultation, but that hasn't been mentioned at this forum at all. And are you aware of it? Am I right? What's the situation, or should we know more about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a white paper, so there is proposals now under review to reform the current Mental Health Act, and Minu, Dr. Minu Irani, our medical director, is kind of leading that and has produced a paper. In fact, produced a paper for the board yesterday to give a flavour of what's in that white paper. That's not the same as obviously what might actually happen in terms of legislation. So it's been out for consultation. Although generally, what's in white paper is quite a big chunk of the substances tend to kind of come through in legislation at some point. So you're right. And if that's a topic that people would want to hear more about, then Julie can. It's not a straightforward topic actually. It's probably a 20-minute, half an hour presentation probably, and with some papers in advance. We can definitely arrange that, Paul. So nothing imminent.
Do we have a view about the timing? I mean, is it for this year or for next year, or the legislation, or?
Minu's on the line. Minu, do you want to say, Minu, about when we think the likely, if it is to come legislation, when that's more likely?
Thank you, Julian. Hi, Paul. Thanks. Very relevant question. The consultation shuts on the 21st of April. The Trust has a number of means to encourage various services to respond, and the Trust Office, Mental Health Act Office, will also respond. If everything goes to plan and it sort of brings, into the bill in the autumn, even then the implementation is unlikely to be until 2023. Because there's always this sort of long process from a consultation to becoming a bill, and then a period of time given, usually 12 months or so for services, because the implications are huge, and probably we will not have the time for me to go on any further here. But yes, happy to have a discussion in a future meeting if governor colleagues would like that, Paul.
Yeah, well, we can postpone that for a long time, it seems, at the moment. Anyway, while I've still got my hand up, on page 159, Julian, there's some numbers relating to out-of-area placements. I'm not. It says the number of occupied bed days for acute older adults or PICU patients for East and for West, and they're way out of target. Is there any sort of narrative which could go with those numbers? They're not actual patients, are they? They're bed days. I think that's right.
That's right, Paul. Yeah, we measured by bed days. Yeah, we certainly saw during the course of the pandemic a spike. So after the first wave, so just to be clear, because we're using waves differently, so time frame, Paul, in April, May, and the first part of June 2020, we saw the biggest reduction of inpatients and out-of-area placements we'd seen for some time, with very low occupancy. As the country, after 3 months of lockdown, started to ease restrictions, we saw a level of presentations, particularly from first episodes of people never known before, coming through in quite high numbers. nationally and locally, which resulted in considerable pressure on beds. The level of illness and acuity we saw and the level of first-time presentations was unprecedented during at least a 6-month period, sort of taking us up from now until mid-January time. It has eased slightly more recently, and again that might be to do with this sort of lockdown we're part of, and again we may see that coming back through. So definitely, Paul, significant use of inpatient beds back end of June for about 5 or 6 months. Very serious conditions coming forward. Some of for the first time got back on top of it, but that again might be because of some rather artificial conditions we're living under.
Okay, so these are community beds, and they're not people in rehab, so coming out of Frimley and not going to a community bed, but having to go up to Northampton or somewhere else. We're not.
This is a measurement is of adult acute mental health beds. Yeah.
Oh, mental health. Okay.
Yeah, but you're right, Paul. There was a few people who had to go for critical care. Say, for example, in East Berkshire, ended up going, some way out of area in the height of the second wave, the more recent wave of the pandemic.
Okay, John Barrett.
Sorry, problem unmuting there. Yeah, sorry. No, I hadn't read it actually until a couple of minutes ago because it's so small, Julian, compared to the rest of the report. I found the Zoom button on my computer now and I've managed to decipher it. I just wonder if there's any benefit in moving towards a more standardised sort of layout. I mean, Julie's been very helpful in moving the Governor subcommittee reports into a more clear format. It might be worth having a chat, something considering. But having had a quick look, I'm very interested in this new initiative with the liaison divert service, Julian. I'd like to say a bit more about that.
Yeah, this is in Reading, isn't it? I think. Which
page are you on, John?
Talking about the liaison and divert service.
Yeah, if you've got a page number on the pack, just so everyone can find it.
Pack
page
is,
1.
Page 151.
Thank you.
Yeah, so a couple of things really. John, I agree with you. I can't read my own version, so we'll see what we do about that. So I can't read it either. I just thought it was me and my age and eyes, so helpful.
We're all getting old, Julian.
It's about Alana House.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. So the Court Divert and Liaison Service, which Berkshire Healthcare runs, is a service that actually links in quite extensively with the voluntary sector. So that might be safeguarding, young offenders coming through. They're actually kind of work hand in glove. And Alana House is something that the probation service work with. It works particularly with women offenders, and the Court Divert and Liaison Service is establishing a more formal relationship with that service, which is a great service, to make sure that we're offering all alternatives and intervening early and supporting those potential women who are at risk of offending. So not waiting till they come to court. So it is a great piece of work. It is a joint piece of work, and I think, yeah, I mean, the service again would always be very happy to come and present in terms of their kind of work and what they do.
Where is Alana House, Julian? I'm not aware of it.
It's in Reading. I don't know exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in Reading, but it's in Reading, yeah.
Okay, Guy.
Yeah, thank you. I noticed that the level of assaults on staff is still very high for the last quarter. I realise that this tends to happen on the inpatient units where staff are where patients are very mentally unwell, and QMIS initiatives at those areas are hoping to reduce those numbers, but it's still very high and they're not coming down yet. So I'm wondering if you're able to please give us some other hope that they will come down, or we're trying to get them down, and maybe there's a reduction in the seriousness of the attacks or the injuries or the impact.
Yeah, great question, Guy. What we have been able to do through quality improvement, particularly on the two wards which are the biggest contributors to violence, is Campion Ward and Sorrel Ward, we have seen a general reduction in violence and aggression. And the area that we struggle most with is where we get individuals with very specific presentations and very high levels of disturbance, where it takes a while to work out what the specific interventions are for that individual. The stats you're looking at, 75% of the assaults were accounted for by one person on Campion unit, to put it in perspective. And we've now got a bit of a plan, settled that patient down, and we're seeing that coming down. Some of the reasons for violence and aggression that previously existed on site have been eliminated through using different regime, different approach. So we're definitely confident we can make some differences. But that particular individual was admitted for extreme violence. So they were assaulting all their family on a regular basis. And again, Campion unit is taking people who are highly aggressive, highly assaultive, that nobody else could look after. And as a consequence, it does take a while to get that down. The level and seriousness of the assaults were in the mild to moderate rather than serious assaults, but every assault sucks the joy out of work, Guy. And we're really keen that we do something about it. So a good question. And again, you don't really get the sort of depth of the kind of flavour of this when you just see the headline figures, i.e. 75% was one individual on one unit. But nevertheless, it was a really important focus for us to try and reduce that very quickly.
Thank you.
Andrew Horn.
Thank you. Two questions. One is, which services have had to be cut back because of the pandemic in this wave? I know the aim has been to keep everything open. The other is, how is the Trust going to review what it's learned from its pandemic experience and use it to prepare for the next pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably get Minu to answer the second question. So you were specific about the services that were sort of stood down and paused. So this time we didn't formally close any services like we did in the first wave, Andrew. So in the first wave, there's a national diktat to redeploy health visiting, school nursing, that type of stuff, because schools were closed and everything else. We didn't do that. But what we did do, Andrew, is redeploy staff from some services to the more critical services. So I'll give you a few examples. Our physios have been incredibly flexible in terms of maybe they traditionally work in an MSK outpatient kind of setting. You might find them, or would have found them, on an inpatient ward providing care, in a COVID-based community physical health care ward, partly because the number of the referrals coming through for orthopaedic treatment from the acutes had reduced dramatically. And so when I visited the physio service in the height of the second wave, they were still seeing a small number of patients face to face who had, complexity or concerns potentially, and so needed to face to face. Quite a lot of it was been done online in terms of routine work, which has actually gone down really well, and a new way of working. And then a number were actually working on wards. So what we saw is a reduction in capacity of services rather than a closure of services. Minu, you may want to add more to that, but particularly perhaps come in and the excellent question about, the so what. Surely, we've learned something about infection prevention control that actually might not be a pandemic, but actually might inform about how we work in the future or things along those lines.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. Thanks, Andrew. The pandemic has taken us all by surprise. So even though we implemented the sort of standard crisis plans, I think that the whole nation and the world has been caught out in a sense. Saying that, there has been continuous learning. So there are a significant number of areas where we have received, evidence-based national guidance quite quickly for management of patients with COVID. So right from dexamethasone to remdesivir to the tocilizumab, the new sort of immune suppressant drug. So that is something continuously that we review, implement in the organization where it's applicable. Of course, we are not an intensive care type of organization. So that's the continuous learning based on national rapid research, NICE guidance, which comes in sometimes, at the peak, it used to come in almost on a weekly basis, new guidance, which we've implemented. Then there is the internal learning, Andrew, which is just simply from our experience of how did we keep our patients safe? How did we keep our staff safe? How did we manage PPE? We can't say that we did everything to 100%, but then we certainly are in line with most other organizations, almost likely to be better because we all face the same challenges. So there is this mix of learning from our own experiences within the organization and constant learning from national evidence-based research and directives which come to us. Happy to take any questions on that if required.
Thank you very much. Andrew, did you have a question?
Yes. What I was hoping to hear is that there's going to be some sort of systematic look at what's been learned, because this is the third epidemic this century, and we may well have another in the next 5 or 10 years. And if it's 10 years, it's long enough to have had a considerable staff turnover, lost a lot of the know-how, and we need to store that information away. Is there going to be a process for that?
I think you're referring to a national process, are you, Andrew?
I would hope there is a countrywide process actually preparing. I'm not saying we are devolving our responsibility, but actually having the correct amount or right amount of stocks of PPE, all the necessary equipment, ventilators, enough oxygen supplies. I mean, these are big ticket items which will be hugely reflected upon after this pandemic is over, or hopefully even in a brief sort of phase of respite, which we hope we'll have in the summer. And we will follow the national guidance on that. Internally, we've been working on all of these things. How do we ensure adequate oxygenation, adequate distancing between beds? So we can do what we can do as an organization. And then there is the sort of wider national learning we very much hope, so that includes testing and tracing and infection control. We hope which will help us in the future.
Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you, Julian, for that. We're now on to item 10. Any feedback from governors? No. Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yes, go on.
Sorry. Yes. I'm a member of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel at Bracknell Forest Council. We have 3 scrutiny panels, of which I'm Vice Chairman of Health and Wellbeing. And we have been doing a big piece of work on mental health, isolation and loneliness. And we've been consulting an awful lot of people, including Julian last week, and thank you very much for coming. It will be published in due course, but what better time to gain information about the situation, the current situation. But I hope you'll all be pleased with it when we finally publish it. Thank you.
Isabel, thank you very much for that. Very interesting. Okay, the date of next meeting is the 5th of May.